Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a Professor of Social Work in the University of Melbourne School of Health Sciences. Australia has for many years depended on immigration for its development, as well as socio-economic growth. Emergency management in Australia is underpinned by an integral approach that incorporates prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. Providing communities with warnings informs their decision-making. Key to this is the availability of transparent, accurate, accessible, and trusted information sources in various forms. Equally important is educating people on how to respond to emergency warnings. Disaster-resilient communities have the confidence to seek information from multiple trusted sources about local hazards and risks, and the availability to respond and take appropriate action accordingly. For some audiences where English is a second, third, or fourth language, such as those in remote Indigenous and culturally and linguistically diverse communities, even simplified versions of warnings written for mainstream audiences may not be effective. The importance of communication at their level of English proficiency is critical. Some migrants may have very limited or no English proficiency, so it is crucial to create a central resource for the timely translation of critical information. The emergency risk management process has shown that these communities can be vulnerable during times of emergencies. Culturally and linguistically diverse communities are more vulnerable than a general public due to language barriers, unsuitable housing, poor employment opportunities, language, culture, and familiarity with the environment in which they live. These communities tend to be less prepared for a disaster event, have fewer resources for evacuation if needed, and experience inequality in access to aid and recovery assistance. Many variables contribute to this vulnerability. For example, people may not be resilient when an emergency occurs if English is not proficient and they cannot access information. They may be more susceptible to a particular hazard or risk as new arrivals to Australia in an unfamiliar environment. Other variables include previous forced migration experiences, variable linguistic competencies, limited social networks, at least initially, and the need to adapt to new host society norms, customs, and laws. In addition, new arrivals to the country will be less familiar with the natural and built environments and the organisational structures for accessing assistance. Current literature suggests that culturally and linguistically diverse communities tend to rely more on interpersonal sources during a disaster, which some attribute to a mistrust of government sources, particularly during unfamiliar situations such as disasters, and especially amongst immigrants from countries with authoritarian governments. Personal experiences are highly relevant in culturally and linguistically diverse communities where previous trauma, cultural or social influences can exacerbate feelings of helplessness, fear, and anxiety during disasters, and therefore how an individual seeks and accepts emergency risk information.